So you can hear us, guy, Soren?
I got you guys.
Fantastic. Okay, sorry for the lack of video. We're building the plane as we're flying it. You're building the drone as you're flying it. Give us the update. How you doing? How was Manifest Demo Day?
Well, yeah, my co-founder Olaf was out there. He crushed it. I mean, we had a big announcement, so we just closed our Series A funding round, $35 million, going straight into more American drone manufacturing. So really excited about that stuff. We also a few weeks ago announced our 6,000 drone production contract. So we are now officially making over 1,000 drones a month, which I believe is the highest rate of any drone company in the United States. So our vision of mass is coming together, but there's still a long way to go.
What's the main use case for these drones?
Yeah, I mean, primarily we're building drones that are going to be putting warheads on foreheads. It's FPV precision strike is kind of all the rage right now, and our we have kind of two systems, Archer and Archer Strike. Archer Strike is the one where we're actually the warhead integrator, and it's basically a modular warhead system. And then we have Archer, which is just the plain FPV drone, and you can basically mount whatever you want on there.
How do you think about scale long term? I think that's probably the number one question
Yeah.
on people's mind that are following the industry. You see this sort of footage coming out of China of not even drone specific manufacturing capacity, but when you just think of China's scale and that being one of our most obvious adversaries, that's what you're up against. You're clearly not afraid, otherwise you probably wouldn't be doing this. How do we sort of reach and exceed China's manufacturing capacity over the next 10 years, given that they have a decades long head start?
I think the question we need to be asking ourselves is what would happen if the Chinese supply chain was completely cut off and we had to build, say, 1 million of these systems in a year? What would we do? What would that look like? And right now, the answer is, the entire American industrial base, I think, would be a disaster,
Mhm.
and even the defense industrial base would be scrambling to make that happen. And we really need to do whatever we can to make manufacturing cool again and get people excited about working on this problem. I mean, we've been sanctioned multiple times by China. It seems like we're getting attention because we're doing something that is relevant. But there's a long way to go,
You
right?
guys
We're
individually,
18 months into this very, very long journey.
so you're saying Neros has already been sanctioned by China?
We have, yeah, we were sanctioned a few months ago for the first time, and then recently they re-upped it. I think we were in the list with General Dynamics and a few others.
It's more prestigious than being on the Forbes 30 under 30.
Yeah.
I see that as a huge bulls case. What about? Can you give us a little idea, a little overview of like what's actually happening at various orders of magnitude of scale? You said you're doing 1,000 a month, I think.
Yep.
When I first met you and toured the facility, it seemed like you were putting everything together by hand. The founders were welding or soldering or doing everything. Now it seems like you probably have some machinery in there, but what does the path to like the lights out factory look like? There was some debate on the timeline last week about, you don't want to do too much automation too early, but obviously we want to get to high production value numbers. So walk me through that.
Yeah. Automation is definitely the last step in the process, and the first step is designing the product around this high rate manufacturing. I think that's one of the big problems that a lot of the existing drone companies in the US run into, is because they're basing off of one, these pretty exquisite components that are tough to source in high volumes, and they're really expensive. And then two, they just didn't actually design the airframe around these really scalable manufacturing techniques or having low human labor to be able to put it together. So that was kind of the first thing we looked at when actually designing Archer. Was how can we reduce the amount of human labor that goes into this thing? So even if we're not automating yet, because things are still in flux and we're not at crazy high volumes, we're still spending, say, like less than an hour of human time per drone that goes together. So that's really, really critical. I mean, we've been in our current factory for about a year, and in that time, it's mainly been about optimizing the main assembly line. And it's still a very manual assembly line, but there's
Yep.
a lot of tooling in place to make everything really repeatable and easy. And then just the design of the drone itself is very intentional.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, people might say, oh, like they're putting these together by hand, but that could actually be the right decision given where you are. Can you tell me a little bit about supply chain? I've heard it's basically impossible to find an American-made drone motor. Is that still the case? Is there a change there? And are you leveraging any of the cool companies that we've talked to, like the Hadrians, the Range Views, the 3D printing companies? Like, what do you see as like really beneficial to you?
Motors are still a big challenge in the US. I got asked on X the other day, like, oh, are you guys winding your own motors? And the answer is no, we're not doing that yet. We definitely want to be part of solving that problem. And, there are some things in the works, but motors have been historically really tough. A lot of US companies are still using Chinese motors because it's not mandated by the government to avoid them. And same thing with cameras, especially low cost sensors. We've seen they're primarily dominated by China. And in our world, in the FPV world, really everything is kind of built on top of architectures that use Chinese chips. So our long time challenge until we kind of finished the work and got onto the Blue UAS list was rebuilding all of these components from the kind of chip level, because you'll look at these open source projects that a lot of like drone racing technology is built off of, and oh, look at that, it's off of a Chinese microcontroller, or like every video receiver for analog FPV in the world uses this Chinese radio module. So you have to get rid of all of that, do all the engineering up from a clean sheet, which has been a big challenge, but we're getting there, and it's great to see these companies that are working on the kind of like fundamental manufacturing challenges. Like that's what I would put Rangeview into the bucket of. Like America needs investment castings, where we're sort of one level up, where we have to be really smart on our component design, but we're not actually making the chips.
Sure.
Do you think a lot of these suppliers over time can and should localize to a specific area? China has a massive advantage, with Shenzhen, and a lot of DJI being able to source a lot of components locally. Do we need that, or is it not necessary? What's your vision of how these things, how we get to producing millions of drones per year?
That's what El Segundo should be, baby. Let's make the American Shenzhen.
Let's go.
Let's do it. Do you feel like you've been very successful at raising a significant amount of capital very quickly? How much is there enough private investment into drones broadly, or do we need to do a multiple more? I posted probably a couple months ago at this point that it felt like we needed a sort of Project Stargate for domestic drone manufacturing. Like it seems like such a critical national security issue that potentially there needs to be an order of magnitude more investment in the category, or do you feel like there's an adequate amount of investment yet?
I'll say that the capital is available to companies, but it has to be directed really well, because both on the private capital side and the government side, like my main ask to the DoD is not to spend more money, it's to spend money in a different way. It's to mandate higher volumes of systems that are lower cost. So it's not just about throwing money at the problem. I think we have to set the expectations, and those expectations might be an order of magnitude greater than, like $1 billion goes towards buying 1,000 loitering munitions. That should probably be 100,000, 2 orders of magnitude difference. So it's not necessarily about spending more money. I do think there is private capital that is ready to go, that's excited to get into this industry. On the government side, I think there are really positive shifts happening in the direction I'm describing, but that's where a lot of this will be driven from.
How's the transition gone from drone pilot to CEO? I know you were running a sort of drone-oriented company in high school, so you had a little bit of experience, but does it feel like you're playing a video game when you're in Slack and you're just sort of manning the ship? Has it been pretty seamless?
Yeah, do you use Slack in the FPV goggles?
That would be really locked in.
Well, it's not Slack, level. It's ITAR compliant. He's on Teams,
but
for sure.
Teams guy.
We We're actually we do use Slack, but
Oh, there you
not
go.
in the goggles. I wish.
Okay.
But it's been an interesting transition. I mean, sometimes I do kind of look around and I'm like, wow, I used to just be flying drones off my back porch, and now I'm doing this. But I think I've always had this really strong natural inclination to start a company, and I've been interested in startups for a really long time. So it feels very natural. Like I understand the exact progression of why I'm doing what I'm doing, but certainly a ton of learnings. I mean, we're also just moving really quickly. And so that comes with, at times a lot of pain and a lot of lessons, but it's been a great journey. I'm super grateful for what I get to do every day.
That's amazing.
Last tiny question: will we ever see a Neros consumer product?
I was gonna ask that. That's a good one.
I think DJI's number one haters over here. We've been trying to get on the sanction. We've been trying to.
We do a lot of cinematic things. We want to film them with drones, but we want to be American about it. It's tough.
Yeah, I think the market dynamic right now is in defense, and that's where the most critical need is. But
Sure.
Our mission is to fix the American drone industrial base. So that doesn't just mean defense, right? I think way in the future, there's a very good possibility that we'll be able to replace DJI on the consumer shelves. I would love to.
That'd be great.
Amazing.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks
We'll
for
have to
coming
have you
on.
back next time there's a big announcement. We really appreciate you calling in. Thanks so much.
Congrats on the milestone.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
See
We'll
ya.
talk to you soon.